Yeah, so that Bevins one doesn't specifically talk about color revolution, so it doesn't mention them.
Yeah.
It's more so about protest in general.
Yeah. That was actually, I was like, this doesn't talk about color revolutions.
Well, it does. It really starts talking about color revolutions with the example of the Maidan revolution, and then it goes off from there. But that's like 3/4 of the way through the article.
What Bivens does, his scholarship looks at it globally. So it links like the alter globalization in the Battle of Seattle, things happening in the West, to things in the global South and Brazil, and then other things that are just pure color revolutions.
Right.
Serbia,
no, I get I mean, having looked at it, I get the connection. I do. Yeah.
Okay.
He seemed to be mostly focusing on like the nature of protests and how they operate and why they're not working, etc., rather than like talking about color revolutions.
But that'll be an interesting thing for us to draw out, because that is a big part of how these protest movements are co-opted.
Yeah, basically, they're co-opted by reaction and imperialist forces rather than co-opted by communists, and we just need to get better at co-opting shit.
And it's also a useful interview because of how he takes apart Leninism as a political ideology and an organizational way of designing class struggle. And in that case, there's lots of right Leninists who are doing a much better job than the horizontal leftists. And we can look at Iran right now as perhaps an example of an organization of resistance that has not been open to co-optation, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. I thought you were saying that it's being. I was like, well, I haven't read anything about it. Then I was going to say, well, yeah, but like, no, I suppose
the opposite. There's
like tons of like media blackouts going on right now that make it hard to know exactly. It's going to have to be retrospective assessments rather than real time assessments of what is or isn't happening over there, because we just don't know.
No, I know Chris is about.
It's actually kind of like nice. Well, it's not. Nothing about the situation is nice.
Well, it's been very instructive to hear the testimony.
I'm putting my foot in my mouth.
It's been very interesting to hear testimony coming from people who were involved in the protests now saying, "This is not at all what we were calling for. We don't want intervention from Western imperialist powers. This is not what our movement was about."
I suppose that's a lesson, really.
Yeah, and the lesson, I guess, is
expand on that.
The lesson is that, I mean, it's the whole purpose of the Vincent Bevins book: spontaneous protests, spontaneous eruptions of, working class, or in the case of Iran, it was middle class outrage. Don't necessarily get the goods. It's like rising up too early, without any kind of organization to put in place of the thing that you're opposing, is a recipe for disaster, a recipe for co-optation. It's exactly what happened with the Iranian protests. They got co-opted by Mossad and CIA.
Mm-hmm. Well, right, and like in the Serbia article, or just if you know about Otpor and what's the Open Society Foundation? What's his name?
Soros is
the
guy.
Basically the post-Yugoslav Serbia early 2000s protest.
Yeah.
And also what's happening.
What color was that revolution?
I don't know. I've lost track of the colors. Like Ukraine was orange.
Portugal was carnation. Right?
Well, no, I think Portugal's a little bit
different. That's different.
Yeah.
That's a left. That's a left color revolution.
Yeah, well, so Portugal is actually like the reverse of what we would normally see in the color revolution formula. It was a military coup that also caused a massive uprising that, swept out the old dictatorship, the Estado Novo.
And it was in the midst of a crisis in Angola, as listeners of Blowback, the most recent season, will be familiar with.
I mean, I think that's why it matters. Like,
such a good show.
It
really is.
The way that revolution or whatever, the way that unrest happens in Hungary versus the way that it happens in Portugal. In both cases, it's just spontaneous, whatever. But the difference is the regime and what it was before. But now that the Cold War is over, the color revolution, I think, was the model. But I think that the slow dying of the unipolar moment and the reemergence of the notion that like might makes right no matter what also seems to me like it might be kind of undoing the whole tapestry of how color revolutions happen and whether or not they serve their purpose anymore.
It looks like looking at this Compact article that the Otpor didn't really have a color. It was a clenched fist and Cyrillic letters for resistance. But then once the Rose Revolution happened in Georgia, then they became synonymous. There was Georgia, the 2003 Rose Revolution, and then the Ukraine Orange Revolution 10 years later.
They should have called it the Brown Revolution.
Well,
I guess the color of fascism in Ukraine is red and black.
A little bit of anarcho-syndicalist borrowing.
It's really funny. It's not funny. It's actually kind of sad how many people were like, "Hey, look at look! They're waving red and black flags because this is a real revolution." It's like, dude, they're not the same as the punks with that who say they're in the IWW. You know, that they have a different red and black flag. They mean something different. That's the flag.
Like we're totally cool with helping out with the Holocaust without even being asked. That's what that flag means.
Yeah, but the main thing, Chris, is that it's horizontalist. So long as it's horizontalist, it's that's okay.
So national syndicalism then?
Yeah, national syndicalism. That's right. No, okay. So there are national syndicalists or anarcho-nationalist types that are involved in the Azov movement. In fact, there's been a move. This is not an uncommon phenomenon of people who were leftists in Ukraine who start fighting with the neo-Nazis and become sort of still hold these principles of, horizontalism or egalitarianism or whatever, but still layer on that Ukrainian ethno-nationalism on top of it.
Man, this is what not reading anything ever does to a motherfucker.
This is paint by
number. You heard that meme revolution. That anarchism, the highest stage of not reading. You heard that meme?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think I've ever seen that before. That's fantastic. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, though, there's I saw online ambiently. I haven't looked into it or anything, but saw people referencing the Communist Party of Iran welcoming the war because it'll topple the regime, and then I guess they conceive of themselves as rising out of the ashes or something like that, even though they're a totally irrelevant force in Iran, totally irrelevant. It's not even they don't even bother to repress the Communist Party of Iran because they're just totally irrelevant.
I saw that too, but I didn't read the statement because it wasn't provided. But it was just like a meme talking about how they bought into the same bullshit that the Western Marxists buy into. But I think what it is it's nuance maxing, as they call it, as the kids are calling it these days, where like they're releasing a statement that both opposes the war and the regime at a time when the regime is fighting. Actually, is on the front lines of the only hot anti-colonial struggle in the world right now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, let's look at what did the Bolsheviks say about the Afghanistan monarchy in 1919 when Afghanistan was getting invaded by Britain. What was the Bolshevik, the most pristine, perfect moment in communist history? The 1919. It was still the early years. Nobody's objecting yet to their stances. What did they say about the monarchist regime in Afghanistan that was being invaded by Great Britain? Well, they said,
yeah,
we fully endorse the monarchist regime of Afghanistan and its national resistance against British imperialism.
Absolutely.
That's the correct position right here. And even
I remember
domestic communists should be backing the regime at this moment in time.
I remember in 2011 there were a lot of people who were saying this in their support of the Syrian revolution. They would say, well, just like the Lenin took the train chartered by Germany, the closed train, because Lenin took a German help to help overthrow Russia. So why wouldn't the Syrians do the same thing with the United States and NATO?
Wow. Yeah, they're the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They should read To the Finland Station by Edmund Wilson, even though he's not necessarily a dialectical thinker. But back to this idea, the meme you referenced, Chris, about like anarchism being the highest stage of not reading. It's like, well, I don't think this is true purely for anarchists, but there's something in this sort of we started talking about like the end of history and what that kind of did to the left. And there's this sort of ingested truism that if you have like the correct political monomyth, reading isn't really necessary, like steady, like careful, like, and that's true for lots of different orientations.
That's like the online Maoist mantra right there.
And I think that if you're like involved in like a anti-colonial struggle, maybe that's the case. Like if you're like Big Bill Haywood, what's the famous thing I always forget, Jason? I never read Capital, but
I've never read Marx's Capital, but I have the marks of Capital all over my body or something along that line.
That's one thing.
That's pretty hard though.
I know.
Yeah. That means you're involved in something. But if you're just online putting forth a political line that is not based upon careful study of and involves strategy, things that are changing, the kind of framework of the global power structure, then you're just basically you prioritize ideology above all else.
Well, I think one of my best friends is an anarchist, and he's good as fuck at reading. That guy reads more than anyone I know.
Right. And not to lay too much at the feet of Lord Chomsky, but I do think there's a kind of modus operandi of like being an armchair intellectual that has seeped its way into the movements. Like what matters is that I can accurately criticize everything from a kind of detached, third, fourth campus position. And in the meantime, I'll vote for the Democrats until there's an opening for my utopian praxis.
Yeah, in my experience, in the recent events in Iran, my interactions with folks in my life that I know who are self-styled to the left of me, what it seems to me to be is that they are putting a super centrality on having the correct affect in response to current events. And that's what matters, is that my affect is correct because I don't like the Shah. The Shah is bad and evil, and he does mean bad things. And so I don't like him. And it's important that everyone knows that my affect.
Oh, you mean the Ayatollah?
Yeah, the Ayatollah. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. But that's a good Freudian slip, because I think for these people, they're almost interchangeable. There is no difference.
Right.
It's oppression.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Oppression. It's like, what? Nothing happened. Nothing changed. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, centralized power is bad, is oppression, is power. Power itself is bad. We're going to just rhizomatically aggregate to sort of embody the will of resistance, and everything's just going to get better because it's going to be, freedom.
Mm-hmm. It's a will that's power.
Yeah.
It's the lack of will to power. That's precisely what it is. I mean, that is really the criticism to my mind of the ultra left position, is that it's I don't believe that anyone actually, I don't find it credible that anyone actually believes that the problem with the left is that there's too much authority, too much centralization, too much strong leading figures who command people around them. I don't think that's not a credible claim that the problem with the left is there's too much organization, too much rigidity, and centralization. I just where what are you talking about?
This brings me
nowhere, but only because we are so vigilant. With,
that's the nation.
We're keeping them at bay with our crass patches and our dreads.
That's the nation's byline. Stay vigilant, right? The magazine. I mean, I can't help but think we've all been. I'm spinning all the time just from trying to keep up with everything, but there's so many commentaries coming out from the left, basically grieving the fact that, and Chris has said this, that the most the best case for against this war is coming from the right online right now.
Yes.
Yeah. The supposed left is kind of like in this splayed position where they're like you said, they're like, the Ayatollah was terrible, the regime is awful, and we're going to try and establish the process. Trump should come to Congress. It's like, meanwhile you have like Tucker Carlson and Sagar and the whole ecosystem basically saying
Candace Owens saying desert. If you're in the military, you should desert and refuse deployment. Right. And then
Nick
people
Fuentes
should not join the military.
Right.
Candace Owens has by far got the most radical line.
I know, you're right.
Real revolutionary defeatism. They're saying
exactly,
we want our leadership to fail, and we want to take whatever cynical actions we can take to make sure that happens.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking wild. And someone is thinking right now as they're listening to this, yeah, but they're doing it because they're anti-Semites, or they're doing it because they're... It's like, yeah, fucking... So what? What they're doing is they're outflanking us to our left. That's what they're doing. It doesn't matter why they're doing it. They're doing a better job of it.
Right. It's not like they're doing it because they're anti-Semites. So instead...
I don't think they are.
We should be.
I mean, Candace might be
happy to see them.
Nick Fuentes is
supporting. Instead, we should say we should be happy to see them supporting support the troops and rallying around the flag as anti-Semites. Like, if they're going to be anti-Semites either way, which one would you rather they did? Or is actually the demand that before they can do anything useful in the world, they have to first change their hearts?
Yes.
Yeah, because intention counts for everything.
Protestant.
That's true.
Right. Yep.
Intention is everything.
This is the Protestant ethic. This is the Protestant worldview.
It's like the totalizing Puritanism of American society, where like ideas are the most important thing in the world, and everything else is subordinate to that.
Yeah. So is that our cold open?
I think so.
Welcome to the regrettable century. We're going to talk about color revolutions
more. We're going to talk about it more.
We're going to talk about it more. So to start things off, 19 minutes and 27 seconds in,
angrily rant for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's define what we mean when we say color revolution, because we've referred to it like a lot already. Okay, I guess I'm going to do it.
I was going to read one from Global Affairs.
Okay.
.ru. It's Russia in Global Affairs. Maybe I'll have a different one. But it says, a color revolution, as we define it, is a mass uprising fueled by the rejection of official election results, backed by a political, diplomatic, and financial support from external forces. This idea first took root in Serbia in 2000 with the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic. The term itself emerged 3 years later in Georgia, 3 years again in Ukraine, etc. So basically, it's like a color revolution is when people are upset about, let's say, a genuine grievance, probably, as far as we could tell from far away. Like, oh, the guy has his thumb on the scale, and so that's why he won the election. So then they protest, but the protests seem very, very disciplined, very well organized, very well funded, and it's because the organizations like USAID and the
the
CIA.
National Endowment for Democracy, which is the CIA slush fund for regime change.
Yeah, and like Open Society Foundation, all these things.
Which is an independent slush fund for regime change that the CIA and the NED and USAID can coordinate with.
It plays the role the State Department played in the Cold War, but in the neoliberal era. That's what the Open Society Foundation is. And
yes.
So then this movement, which has no real aspirations other than just to get out there and make your voice heard, all of a sudden it helps bring down the whole government, and it happens to always redound to the benefit of the people who pull the strings and rule the world. And I guess that's why we wanted to talk about it today.
Right.
And so that's something. What is this?
Oh, I was trying to fit that in earlier, but speaking of how the left is, I just noticed this when I was logging on to the podcast. Like, just compare this statement. Regardless of side, conduct expected of all Socialist Party members and the military. 1. Fulfill duties and follow orders and regulations. Submit to draft. 2. Defense of self and fellow soldiers. Protect everyone's rights. 3. Don't commit crimes or any crimes. War crimes or any crimes. 4. Survive. So the last two I can understand.
We call that.
I like what Candace Owens is saying better.
Me too.
What Ben? What you just quoted, we call that revolutionary defensism.
Yep.
And it was the founding moment of the split in the socialist movement, where one side stopped mattering to the working people of the world. The other side made the world's first worker state. And it was on this question was the dividing line.
Well, okay, so the color revolution thing is just shorthand for, astroturfed or co-opted, not necessarily even astroturfed, but definitely co-opted movements against some state that the United States doesn't like, regardless of their legitimacy, how democratic they are, whether or not they are good or bad, that's irrelevant. It's some state, the United States or the West, maybe it's the European Union that doesn't like them. A movement against those states that is used for the benefit of, the global imperialist hegemon being the United States and its erstwhile puppet states in Europe, its vassal states. And we've seen a lot of these happen over the years. Like, as we mentioned before, Ukraine is probably the most recent successful one, the Maidan coup. And all these articles we're talking about will be linked in the show notes. There's a Vincent Bevins interview where he talks about the violence of the Ukrainian state against the protesters sort of spurred them on to seize power in the face of negotiations that were going to lead to a peaceful de-escalation and a new set of elections. But those elections weren't reliable. The eastern part of Ukraine might have just re-elected. What was his name? Shit, I'm forgetting what his name is. The Ukrainian president that was supposedly pro-Russian.
We'll have to look it up.
Yanukovych?
Oh, yeah. Yanukovych.
Is it Yanukovych? Let's make sure.
I gotta look this up.
Yes. Okay, because I get Yanukovych and Poroshenko mixed up because they're both avowed enemies of Zelensky, but Poroshenko is also Ukrainian nationalist. But yeah, so the eastern portion, like the Donbas portion and down curving around to Odessa, was not a reliable voting demographic. So they didn't want to rely on a new set of elections because they might just elect another person that wouldn't carry out the Banderite agenda. So there was some violence that came. There were some shots that were fired into the crowd, as they call the Maidan snipers. It came from a building that was controlled by the right sector, and they blamed it on the regime, which, the regime was in the midst of de-escalating protests, and so it really didn't make any sense that they would shoot from there. And some innocent protesters were killed. So there's sort of like this tandem hand-in-hand relationship between the NED-funded sort of squishy neoliberal types in the crowd and the far-right nationalists who are working likely with, and we don't have any evidence of this, but we do have a lot of evidence for the CIA being on the ground immediately after the coup. But they were likely working with the CIA trying to overthrow Yanukovych. That's how these things work. Their color revolutions aren't just well, maybe if the spontaneous uprising is big enough and powerful enough that the people will just be swept into power. No, there are actors that embed themselves in these, quote, spontaneous uprisings that take control of them because they are better organized. They have the power of the European Union and the United States military and the CIA and the National Endowment for Democracy, the Open Society Foundation, whatever, behind them to help take control of these protests and push them in the direction they want to go, which presents a conundrum for leftists, doesn't it?
Do you remember? I don't want to name this guy. It was back when we were in college, and he was a proponent of Otpor's teachings, and he was very anti.
Of whose teachings?
Otpor. He's it's like the
Serbian resistance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
His group was called United Aid. He was a big proponent of Occupy style. Anyways, but this stuff got really popular again during the Occupy movement. It was it's decentralized. This is just the will of the people. No one can actually push an agenda here. It's just going to be what it's going to be. And it turns out that in a society as stable as the United States, which for our younger listeners is a thing which made sense you could say back then. But in a society as stable as the United States was, that kind of logic, that kind of spirit is something that could be used to just let everyone spin their wheels until they go home, because Occupy didn't do anything. In a society which is less secure, and also, when the people in this society want to actually damage that one, that kind of leaderlessness and structurelessness is intentionally stoked at the same time that unofficial leaders and unofficial structure is that those things are injected from without.
Yeah, that's one of these articles. Oh, I think it was the Bevins one. He mentions how David Graeber said that, during the Cold War, we needed organizations that were organized like armies because we were in a war. And now the Cold War is over. It's the end of history, so-called. So we can now rely on fucking vibes, man. Horizontal organization. Which, David Graeber has written one thing that was any good, and it had absolutely nothing to do with his, his thinking about organization.
What do you reference?
But yeah, that's
What's the one thing you liked that he wrote?
That how progress doesn't exist anymore. Technological.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would object. I think Graeber is was whatever. It doesn't matter. I would.
Kevin likes another thing Graeber wrote.
Yeah, I would speak in defense of Graeber that I don't know, half the time when he spoke or wrote things, I think he was good. It was very pointedly when he was on his little anarchist hobby horse of being anti-materialism that he was he was a committed and conscious anti-materialist, idealist about the way we change the world is just by we can just change our ideas and then we'll voluntarily just reorganize,
vibes.
That was vibes. Exactly.
I will say it's easy. Change. It's easy in hindsight, especially with our experience of it at the time. Sure. But Bevins has done a pretty thorough critique of it, but I will just say all the microsects that led up to Occupy weren't getting anywhere. The anarchists did have a kind of a praxis that led to mobilization. It's just they didn't have the means to create something out of it that could withstand.
I don't think the anarchists had a praxis that led to mobilization. I think mobilization that happened had absolutely nothing to do with anyone's idea, any leftist's ideas of how to mobilize.
Totally in spite of the left.
In spite of the left, not because of it, exactly. Yeah. It didn't have anything to do with us either, but it didn't have anything to do with the anarchists.
I don't know. I think Occupy was this big tent invitation for grievance that
Sure.
groups of the ISO were incapable of offering to the populations.
Right. No, I think that's true.
More
I
than
think that,
incapable, they were resolutely unwilling to.
Hostile
actually
toward.
refused to. Yeah.
Unwilling and incapable.
yeah, positively hostile to, but it's not the mode of organization of anarchists that allowed it to come into fruition. It's like Jason has alluded to a few times in the past, that it's the sort of thing that happens. Like, there are thunderstorms, there are weather events, there are earthquakes, there are things that happen from time to time, no matter what you or I or anyone else on this earth consciously intends to organize or foment or oppose or whatever. It doesn't matter. There are spontaneous sort of upheavals that boil over sometimes. And
Right.
the question isn't, whose mode of organization is going to cause this boiling over. The question is, how are we going to organize ourselves as conscious actors in the world, trying to overcome capitalism and realize the empowerment of the working class that will lead the humanity toward communism and liberation. How are we going to organize ourselves and respond to these moments that happen, whether we want them to or not?
So
Right,
that's
like sort of the Bevin. That's the Bevin's point.
Yeah.
It's like somebody's going to lead,
right?
Someone's going to lead and take over the movement.
Right.
It's either going to be us or it's going to be the bad guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there is a let's call it, a divine will. There is an absolute which is manifest and is moving. The difference is only going to be whether or not there is in fact a soul of the world, a historical actuality, like
Weltgeistzuferde.
Right.
So
to be at the forefront of historical actuality, because a person is a conscious actor in it, an actor of it, like Bonaparte, or in a way where no one's ever this conscious of it. But like the Bolsheviki, they knew that they were on the precipice of something that was happening, regardless of what they wanted, whatever they felt was actually almost irrelevant. That was, I think maybe the most, it's definitely my favorite anecdote. When about 1905, when Plekhanov says, he's the godfather of the Russian Marxists, and he says the workers shouldn't have taken to arms. Like, what are you going to do? They shouldn't have done that. It wasn't their time. And Lenin responds to him and says, but they did.
Yeah. Nevertheless.
And that means the action is happening, whether you want it to or not. The only question is, how are you going to respond to the action? The difference between being at the forefront of historical actuality and being dragged behind it is whether or not you are a conscious actor of it. And Occupy Wall Street was an example of historical actuality, or possibility, to say that, historical possibility, and the resolute refusal of potential historical actors.
Hey, that actually puts us back on track to talk about color revolutions, because we need to talk about what they're not also. And I think that, not every spontaneous uprising against an oppressive government is a color revolution, obviously, right? And even if something is infiltrated by the CIA and NGOs that support, the neoliberal world order, there is an authentic element of resistance that's generally embedded within those things. So I think that it might be hard to tell what the difference is for a lot of people. And I think the best way to be able to tell is you look at a situation like the one we have right now in Iran. Now, there was a protest that was sparked by the United States collapsing Iran's economy on purpose, as admitted by Scott Bessent on national television a few weeks ago. They collapsed Iran's economy on purpose in order to foment a movement that could be co-opted and lead to regime change. So when you look at on the ground, there's a movement with economic demands, and of course, the media in the United States doesn't report on that. They report that it's an anti-Islamic movement, in the country of Iran, where everyone like an overwhelming majority are Muslim, even if they might not be, the particularly radical version of Shia Islam that controls the state. Most people in Iran are Muslim. So, but the way that it gets projected to the West is that it's an anti-regime, anti-Islamic movement that wants women to be able to uncover their heads and wants women to be able to take part in society, which they fucking do. It's a ridiculous myth that they don't in Iran. And they want to like ban the burqa and stuff like that, which Iran doesn't have burqa laws. That's not traditional in Iran. They wear a hijab, but whatever. Stuff like that. So it's, as soon as these economic demands come forward, the news starts reporting that it's an anti-Islam, anti-regime protest. And then all of a sudden there are people with incredibly well-armed people fighting the cops and burning down police stations and burning down mosques. So that one was kind of easy. You could kind of tell right away, this is not an indigenous uprising. This is something that has been co-opted. But it's not always that easy. It's not always that easy to tell.
Yeah, the people that
was going somewhere with that, but
the people that think it is should go back and read Fanon, and his writing about the veil. Yeah, there's this. It's literally the imperialist. What do we call it? What do we call it? First world socialist liberal. What do we call that? Third campus, Kevin?
Liberal. I mean, you look at who are the morality police in Iran enforcing women's dress codes? It's women. It's so much more complicated than the way that everybody likes to pretend that it is. And it is so fucking just facile the way that it's just thrown out as like women's oppression is the reason we need to liberate Iran or whatever. And that's why we've got to drop bombs on girls' school, which, by the way, girls were in school being educated when U.S. bombs were dropped on their heads.
Oh, yeah. A vast majority of the population of Iran, including women, is now literate, as opposed to under the Shah, when women were illiterate.
Right.
Exactly. A huge, huge increase in literacy rate under the current regime, the Ayatollah, and not the Shah. And, I mean,
an incredibly sophisticated society, an advanced, sophisticated society created by the Islamic revolutionary regime, which has its problems. I don't want to go live there, but that's a problem for the Iranians to take care of. It has anytime there are calls from within a country for outside forces to step in and help out, you can tell that's color revolution.
Yeah, yes. Categorically right there.
Yeah,
I can. So, when I think back, when I look at the people who I know in my life who take this position, this posture, and when I think back to my own past of being being like a third campus type person in situations like this, it makes me want to be more sympathetic to the posture, and in my own most self sympathy that I can conjure up, I think about how it was a posture toward a sort of universal human emancipation, an aspiration toward that indulged my own naivety, my own ignorance as a creature of the Western media ecosphere. It was my lack of further knowledge or understanding beyond what had been presented to me by the world writ large. I had a complemented by my own just sort of impulse toward a universalism, which I think is a good impulse. So there's a part of me that wants to be sympathetic to this tendency. It just needs education. Part of the frustrating bit of it is that it tends to be like a self-indulgent, self-congratulating, ignorance that resists education, because it's like, oh, well, I'm on the side of human emancipation, so who are you to tell me that these bad people over there are good, actually?
Yeah, ideological emancipatory positions and lines kind of take the place, like this philosophical moral dilemma between means and ends, like on the world stage, take the place, become a placeholder for actual analysis of how power exists. I was thinking about so the original color revolutions, when they become coined as such, they were taking place. What are they? They're Serbia, Georgia, Ukraine, before the Arab Spring, which is kind of different, but it continues the legacy a bit. And what are those? Those are taking place in the new Cold War with Russia, right?
Right.
With NATO expansionism. And even with Georgia, if you'll recall, Bush came out and threatened to go to war with Russia. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Barely, vaguely.
It's kind of forgotten, but there's this basically his longstanding campaign to provoke what eventually does occur. How many years are we into the war now? 4 or 5?
I think we're starting year 5 now, right?
Yeah. So this is the culmination of.
No, we're starting year 4.
Yeah. So
the
color revolutions are the dress rehearsals.
Yeah.
And I think that we can look at
You remember revolutionary rehearsals?
I do. I remember that's when I first read about the Carnation Revolution.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like these are the most stark examples of, especially the Maidan.
The instant breakfast revolution.
The Maidan coup is the most stark example of kind of okay, well, this has the least legitimacy maybe of any of these. But then when you get into some of the things in the Arab world and in the global South and Brazil.
Oh, well, the Arab Spring.
Yeah.
Which I think those were legitimate revolutions.
Yeah.
Not revolutions. Legitimate uprisings, obviously. I don't think that the Arabs, the movement to overthrow
Mubarak.
What's his name? I don't remember the name of the Algerian president, but
I don't remember either.
Or
I was gonna say,
Tunisia.
it's Ahmed Ben Bella, but I'm several decades. That's a much older guy.
What was the one the Egyptian
Mubarak
president that was Mubarak, right? So obviously Mubarak was a bad guy, but he was the United States' guy.
Yeah,
he was on the payroll.
Yeah, that's why it's not a color revolution, because they threw out our guy.
Yeah, they threw out our guy. But what it was a leaderless, sort of spontaneous. They called it the Twitter revolution. Remember?
Right.
It was this leaderless, spontaneous movement that brought in a regime that was worse. The Muslim Brotherhood stepped in, took care of, and took over the protests, came to power, overstepped its boundaries, and was overthrown by a military coup that put a military dictatorship in. And now the government in Egypt is much worse than the government of Mubarak. So it's not like we just add people's discontent, stir up, foment rebellion, and then you put it in the oven and something better comes out. No, you might just make the situation better for something worse to happen if you don't have disciplined, organized leadership to take over and usher in the new society.
Yeah, I kind of think that we could maybe look at it as the color revolution is a tactic from the Cold War that was applied to undermine Warsaw Pact governments in Hungary.
Yes.
And then in the 90s and the 2000s, it was there is no bloc, there's no Warsaw Pact, so we can just do this kind of formula, or repeat this formula everywhere. 2011, from the Egyptian revolution and Tunisia to the fucking absolute hell on earth that happens in Libya and in Syria, they start to show that the color revolution as a way of conducting geopolitical affairs is maybe not so airtight anymore. Maybe it's not quite as effective. So
there's
I think
an extreme amount of violence applied from the outside to make those two color revolutions actually topple their dictators, you know?
Yeah, so they start to become something else. And I think that's like when we're talking about like Iran right now, the reason why it's a would-be color revolution, which is now, I mean, it's just a fucking war. But,
right.
The difference is, I guess color revolution just that strategy relies on and requires a certain set of conditions, which I'm not sure if exists anymore. Not quite in the same way, anyways.
Right.
Also, when I said earlier when I was talking about Occupy Wall Street, and I was talking about how we were only at the historical possibility, but we weren't actors in it, so we couldn't be at the forefront of historical actuality. That's maybe a little bit
dismissive.
a little bit too flowery, but I think that's definitely the case for a global movement in 2011. Because between the movement of the squares in Europe, Occupy, and then also the Arab Spring, again and again and again, there is nobody to kind of centralize and lead and aspire to do something more until we have this, the influence of a much more, I don't even know what I want to call them, fucking Islamists, I guess. CIA proxies.
There's this section that I was looking at earlier, and you bring us back to in the Bevins interview. And by the way, that the entire thing is available to listen to on the Dig. That's what it's transcribed from. But Bevins quotes or references the Turkish sociologist Zeynep Foukechi when she looks at the mass protest decade on a slogan from the 60s. What if they had a war and nobody showed up? She asked, what if we had a protest and everybody showed up? What if literally everybody in the country was invited to come out for their own reasons and bring their own sets of grievances and bring their own interpretation as to what it is? At that point, you end up just reproducing the existing society, which is something that Lenin warned would happen if there was a fully spontaneous protest. And he's talking about Sao Paulo in this bit. He references like how this is no longer something that is the basis of a natural working class base of a militant left-wing movement. And you start getting petty bourgeois reactionary understandings of what the protest is even about. And that sounds pretty familiar too.
It very much does.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just froze. My internet's been like real stupid recently. I don't know what's going on.
It's always been funny to me how like people on the West Coast always have such fucking bad internet, even when they're paying like premium dollar for like good internet. What the fuck is up with that? It's really weird to me.
There's probably multiple. I mean, I'm in a much higher density of,
Oh, for sure.
I don't know about Kevin. It's not like the entire West Coast has the same infrastructure, like so smaller communities have not been, their infrastructure hasn't been updated. But I think...
Okay, now Jason's back, so Kevin's gone. Now that Jason's back, Kevin is gone. Yeah.
Kevin, I just read this from while you were frozen in time, I read this from the Bevins interview, which was kind of like speaking to something Jason brought up about what occurs without leadership.
And Ben, you were starting to say something.
I was starting to say something because I didn't want to forget it. But basically, either you or Chris were bringing up sort of the prehistory of what was deemed color revolutions in the early aughts. And I feel like solidarity, which comes about at the end of the Soviet Union, is a very direct precursor to NATO interventions.
That's true.
Solidarność. Yeah.
And so there's like it would be interesting and further clarifying to sort of disambiguate these interventions that are happening in the 80s at the end of the Soviet Union, and then the ones that start happening in Eastern Europe in the 90s and the 2000s, which of course include Yugoslavia in a cataclysmic way, and then take us into like other regions.
Yugoslavia is sort of the format that these newer color revolutions have taken, where it was like, uprising against Milosevic, and then, the 48 days bombing of the civilian infrastructure of Belgrade. So it's like, that's sort of the model that's been utilized in Iran, I guess.
Yeah. Did you guys see the Trump and Hegseth being asked about the elementary school? And you can just see you can see their eyes melting while they say, no. Trump says, no, Iran did it. And Hegseth just reiterates, we're investigating.
Yeah, and the reporter immediately responds, you're still investigating? And he's like, I can guarantee you that the United States does not target civilians, but Iran does.
I think I saw something close to fear in Trump's eyes. I don't know if it was just me, but there's something like quaking in his eyes when he says Iran did it.
I hope he's got fear in his eyes.
Well, he's going to die soon, so he's going to go to hell,
Well, even by his own admission, even he says, I don't know if I'm going to make it to heaven. And I've read I read enough about what I guess we could just call the Epstein files to think he might probably not.
All motherfuckers going to hell.
Oh, yeah. God. He's
I've never wanted hell to exist so much as I do right now.
Yeah.
If it does, I don't think it's going to be like people that jacked off too much. It's going to be like Trump,
Well, there's different, there's different definitions of hell, right? Like my father, who's still a believer, he believes that it's just a pure separation from God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like maybe the greatest torment, right?
That's officially Catholic doctrine too,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but there's enough wiggle room for you to interpret it any way you want to, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in Dante's Inferno or whatever. But like the first layer of hell is like the great pagan, philosophers,
virtuous pagans,
of ancient Greece or whatever, Greco-Roman teachings or whatever in the first level of hell, and their sole punishment is just separation from God. But I mean, I think the desire for there to be a hell to punish these people is precisely arising from the fact that they will not be punished otherwise, and that's what I mean by like I don't think there is fear in his eyes, because I think he correctly recognizes that none of them are ever going to get what they deserve, which is, by the next coming administration, putting them up on trial and hanging them for their crimes.
Yeah.
The other possibility is that maybe he has fear in his eyes because he knows he's in an impossible position.
Fear might be the wrong word, but it's just like,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the investigation, the U.S. investigation of the incident has already concluded now that it was a U.S. bomb that killed those girls.
Yeah, definitely.
And my understanding is that speculation has been that it was likely a target decided by AI, and that's why it happened.
Yeah. And I was talking about this at work yesterday, so this is just a crazy connection that I won't take too long going into, but so the disruption with the Strait of Hormuz is going to wreck the entire oil production of the region.
Yes.
And that's what all of the Gulf states depend on wholly for everything, including their massive investments in our AI economy.
Yes.
Here, which makes up 40% of our stock market, and is creating the technology that is misdiagnosing strikes and killing, all these children. It's like a crazy, weird. It makes your head spin.
Yeah, it's like it's not just
like an evil
not a bubble, like in the way that
of mirrors. If
you imagine like a balloon, and if it gets too big, it pops. It's more like a soap bubble. It's so extraordinarily fragile.
Yeah,
all of this growth is all it's based on nothing. It's fictitious.
So whenever I was like an ISO communist, I had this idea of the ruling class as being like organized the way our tight-knit socialist organization was, and like having their hands on the levers and the pulleys, and being able to direct the global economy the way they want it to, and we have to be as organized as them in order to topple them. It never occurred to me that they were a bunch of just absolute fucking dipshits,
Yeah.
But it turns out that's what's going on here. Letting the market decide is the dumbest thing that anyone could ever do.
Well, it's just like how toward the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, there are these ruling classes in Europe, like the French ruling class. You know why Louis XVI gets executed, gets his head cut off?
Yes.
Because the French royal family, they're under house arrest. They decide to escape, so they organize an escape, and the carriages.
They want to dress them in rags and smuggle them out in like a horse cart or something. Like
the carriages. Yeah, they have regular carriages. They're just not opulent enough. They are carriages, just they're not befitting royalty. So they say, we're not going to do that. We bring us back carriages befitting royalty. So they bring. So their guards like, okay, so they get new ones, and then they escape and they get out, and then they're going down the road, and like they're immediately spotted because everyone's like, that's the fucking king.
Hey,
you could tell.
The king.
Yeah. So at a certain point, it's what when Lenin says
morons.
this, he talks about how there are three things necessary for revolution. The first thing is that the ruling class has to be incapable of ruling in the old way.
Right.
King Louis refusing to escape with his own life and thus his own and possibly his own power, because he can't sit in a bourgeois carriage. He has to be in a royal carriage, is an example of being incapable of ruling, even not just in the old way, just at all. And it looks like maybe that's what this AI targeting is showing of our ruling class as well.
Yeah.
What about the Bolshevik royal?
Several tens of millions of dollars of missiles to blow up paintings of helicopters.
Yeah. Every single one of those fucking guided munitions dropped on a Wile E. Coyote painting of a fucking helicopter.
Yeah.
was hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars.
Oh God, it's so beautiful to see that happen. But I mean, Jason, I think it's exactly right because bringing up that formulation, because that points to the decrepitness of the current ruling class in the
decadence, if you will.
Yeah, the decadent U.S. empire. But there's importantly two other elements of that formulation, and I think that the utter, just astonishing incompetence of the current ruling regime and the regime that came before it, which was the opposing party, and the regime that came before that, which was an instantiation of the current party. It's we've got a continuation of the ruling parties being utterly incompetent and decadent. But what they're riding on is institutional inertia, which we don't have the benefit of. Us opposing the current ruling class. We don't have the benefit of institutional inertia. We have institutional inertia that we have to, radically overcome. That we don't. It's not even within our capacity to do so. Those other two elements of the of Lenin's formulation are still at work here, and they're not bringing down the present ruling order.
No, there's always the possibility of common ruin of the contending classes,
Yes, and to Chris's point about the ruling class, this inchoate, very undisciplined class, it's basically incompetent sadism, and all that it knows how to do is flood the zone. That is, it's like just maximalist policy. It's almost like the gaudy gold curtain version in Trump's ballroom. There's like a 1-to-1 between that and how they're enacting these interventions. And in the meantime, on their right flank, they have all these totally insane Christian Zionists that are really cheering for us to drop a nuclear bomb on Iran and hasten the second coming, etc. So,
yeah, and the funny thing is, even if you are a biblical literalist, that's still not there.
Yeah, it's not even there, man. I was raised as a Christian Zionist, you know? When we were kids, we were Christian Zionists. This is not part of it, dude.
It's not part of it at all.
We don't need. They could rebuild the third temple without having to fucking bomb Iran. Iran's not stopping anything.
So this is
okay. So in their minds, Iran is the only reason that Gazans and people in the West Bank, Palestinians, are able to resist. You know, it's a complete underestimation of the will of the Palestinian people. They will resist to the last fucking person.
Well, they should have studied, the Warsaw Uprising. They should be looking at the blueprints, right, of what happens.
They don't study history; they study fake history.
This bringing in the Christian Zionism aspect is it's a crazy divergence. There is no color revolution that can be attached to this worldview.
Yeah, that's right. I think
it cannot be grafted onto any oppressed peoples. Just look at the dramatic betrayal of the protest movement in Iran.
The heaviest hit part of Tehran is the middle class area that the bazaar merchants are based out of, and the college students are from. That the protests were centered in, and Trump accidentally admitted that they already killed all the people that they were thinking about putting in place after the Ayatollah was deposed, and as now saying, we don't care if a religious fundamentalist is in charge as long as they're friendly to the U.S.
This is before he accidentally admitted that blowback is probable, that we might have a terrorist attack any day now.
I think that what we're seeing is that the color revolution as a tool as a weapon to be wielded is no longer practical, because the color revolution is a tool of a much more it's a much less degenerate ruling class.
Right.
During the age
it's a tool for the end of history.
Yeah, it's exactly. Whenever George
stable
Bush
global neoliberal order
or Obama were president, you could conceivably and even maybe reliably enact to meddle in the ways in which you could say this is now a color revolution.
Right.
And in the era of Trump, in the era of whatever the fuck this moment is in history, which is very decisively not that, instead of color revolution, you get this war, which is maybe even who knows what it's going to be, but it's definitely the end of. There's no movement left to co-opt because you've already bombed everybody.
And also the boomer population that is highly co-optable as far as the mass media networks, who are the last vestige of propping up this narrative, are aging.
That's true, yeah.
And no one else is buying it. No one is depending, like the people that are convincible to support this kind of bullshit are the people that are tuning into CNN and Fox News, which is dwindling by the day.
So we have I wrote down 6 things. We've been through 3 of them. Do you think it's worth trying to do the other 4, or are we coming to a kind of natural conclusion anyways?
No, let's try to power through these. Like, okay, so number 3 on the list. It's like, why do liberals, anarchists, third campists like uprising just against whoever so much? Does this leave only the super online tanky habit of Stalin memes and Assad adulation?
That's a genuine question.
That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier whenever I, maybe out of order, brought that up about my own sort of examining my own sort of inclination toward third campism, and how that was an easy inroad for me, is because it favored the sort of my not natural, but my inculcated disposition, given the present media ecosystem that I had been raised in, that I lived in. It just lent itself to, well, all these people are bad people, so I don't have to think about it, So I think there is a certain degree of sympathy that I have for this posture of being in favor of human emancipation globally, and I don't like I grant agency and humanity to oppressed peoples everywhere, and I support their rising up against their oppressive regimes anywhere and everywhere around the world. That's a commendable first step, I guess, but it's frustrating in how intransigent it tends to be among its adherents, that these people refuse to scratch the surface and dig a little bit deeper.
Right. Like, I mean, the inclination is good, right?
Yeah.
To oppose dictators and, champion universal human emancipation. But like, if the uprisings are specifically to oppose universal human emancipation, then you can't really support those uprisings. And the reason why third campists, anarchists, liberals, the reason that they support these spontaneous, quote, uprisings, no matter what, is because they still have this belief that uprising in and of itself is a good thing and can carry the working class to power, or, the people, depending on which stripe of, ultra leftist you're talking about here, can carry the people to power, regardless of the interference of the, of foreign NGOs or the CIA or whatever. And I think that we have to be smart enough not to think that that's true. Without a vanguard party to lead the masses to their own emancipation, the vacuum will be filled by the agents of Western imperialism.
Yeah, I
think that is the lesson of the whole 2011 moment in history is precisely that.
Well, we've all inherited downstream from the New Left, or at least the worst versions of it, this kind of decontextualized Maoist truism that it is right to rebel, and that gets taken up in the punk rock scene, and it is a profoundly attractive and embraceable maxim, and it does recognize that rupture is key, but it does not recognize that organization is more key.
Exactly.
So
I mean, rupture is key, and I mean, we're always looking for rupture, but what we should be doing is always organizing, so that when rupture happens, there are organizations to step in and compete with the nefarious actors who will inevitably take control if we're not there. And I think that, I mean, that's all there is to it. It's a simple explanation to it. And I don't know how to get to the point where organizations are strong enough to do that, but we have to try.
I mean, I think that we're very much still in the stage of admitting that. That's a big part of it. It's just like saying the recognition of the necessity is a huge step in actually enacting the necessity, because otherwise all we have is this, what I put here, this dichotomy between the just revolt for its own sake, just because revolt is good to always do, or else the other side is the online tanky habit of Stalin memes and Assad adulation.
Yeah. Which I think, honestly, and we say this every time, that is far less destructive than fucking cheerleading NATO. As it definitely destroys other countries to try to inflict the will of the imperial hegemon.
Well, as we said last time,
that's the real lesser evilism.
Yeah. As we said last time, the NATO interventionism is what allows these dictatorial regimes to hold on to their power and be legitimated. Like that's absurd. You're by cheerleading the West in these interventions, you're actually empowering the Assad figures.
Like, who's going to be stupid enough to try to rebel against their dictatorships now that they know that the end result of it is the fucking apocalypse that's being inflicted upon Iran?
I mean, it's funny because a really good example, a couple of days ago, you could say maybe the Kurds between Turkey, Turkey, whatever. They don't like when we say Turkey anymore. Turkey, because I speak English. Sorry. Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. You have 4 parts of a whole, of a totally stateless people, the world's largest actually stateless people. It's like a few days ago that was a potential, people who you could muse that maybe that's who can be mobilized to do your dirty work, to revolt, even though the Kurds have been continually sold out, repeatedly sold out and fucked over countless times. But even the Kurdish regional government issued a statement saying, "We are not your guns for hire. This is not our struggle. Leave us alone." So maybe nobody. Maybe the answer to your question is maybe nobody. Hopefully nobody. I guess that does leave the next question then for me, though, is does this mean that there's just no legitimate basis for revolution until some, like imagined day after the primary contradiction of imperialism is resolved somehow? Basically, what's left then?
Yeah, that's the conundrum that we spoke to last time.
Yeah. So, next item that Jason has here is, what does it mean to take up the position of revolutionary defeatism seriously today? I mean, I think, let me read what Candace Owens said. Where is it? Hold on real quick.
Really quickly, while you search for that, Chris, just to respond to the last question, to do my move. I think in order for there to be, back to what Kevin said last time, in order for there to be an actual internationalism at home that can provide material support to movements, we have to build it here. It doesn't begin with statements and professions and political lines. So that's really the first step. And we can have those statements and professions and lines, but we are part of the problem here for why revolution seems impossible and why we're waiting for the rest of the world to respond.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So how to be a revolutionary defeatist, in the words of Comrade Candace here: do not join or remain in the United States military. Trump has betrayed America and expects you to die for Israel. There is no honor in being led by dishonorable men to your death. And no notes.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, honestly, what does it mean for us? Like, people who aren't involved in revolutionary organizations, people whose posting style is Marxist, to call for revolutionary defeatism. I guess that means just don't fucking parrot propaganda that is being put out there by the imperial hegemon. We debunked the Iran killed 40,000 people in one day claim that was being spread by the NGOs linked to the CIA and the Pavlovist monarchist. And people are still sharing that. Like, leftists are still sharing that kind of bullshit. It's obviously not fucking true. The independent human rights organizations say it's possible that up to maybe between 2,000 and 5,000 people died, which is still horrible, horrific. Terrible,
horrific. Also
bad.
Includes police and people killed by quote unquote protesters who were
Mossad commandos
head to toe in U.S. and Israeli military gear. Yeah, exactly.
And also, it's not exactly one-to-one. It's not quite the same thing, but isn't that just about the number of people that died at the hands of police in the United States last year? a whole lot of people, like a lot of people, died in these protests. Most, on both police and protesters, and it's really tragic. But it's not at all.
Sorry, I said 20,000. It's like 13,000, 1,300, okay. 1,300. Yeah, I don't know why I said 20,000. It's like, damn, dude.
You're pulling an Persian diaspora move there.
Yeah, just making up
Comrade
giant
G,
numbers.
please fire when ready, Comrade G.
Yeah.
Actually, I would be happy if they would just, cut off diplomatic relations with Israel. That would be a good start.
It would be nice. I
this.
know, but
Good
look,
Big
they are
socialists.
making smart. Frankly, they're making smart moves and laying low and playing the long game, and they're letting the U.S. destroy itself, and not, taking drastic actions. And frankly, that's makes sense, and it's in their own self-interest to do so.
That nefarious Chinese tactic,
of just like
letting the United States destroy itself,
just sitting back and just like letting,
It's true. I am sometimes guilty of having a different timeline and different expectation for what's going to happen along that timeline than God does.
Yeah.
Are you calling the Chinese God? Comrade G God?
Oh God, that makes me so happy. I love that so much.
Not so much that I don't mean that Comrade Xi is God, but I do think that
yeah, I know.
In terms of being a divine instrument, like the way that Steve Bannon talks about Donald Trump, I do think that he's kind of right, but not at all in the way that he means. I think that he might be a divine instrument, but not in the way that he thinks he is.
So Donald Trump is like the retarded
he's a divine
Napoleon.
Instrument in the way that exactly.
So these commanding officers.
That's even better than I was going to say.
These commanding officers that sent out these the note to the soldiers that we shouldn't be worried. They shouldn't be worried because Donald Trump is ordained by God. It's all true, but it's just the inverse.
Inverted, exactly. Standing on its head,
Like it's in the way that like medieval.
Go ahead.
It's like in the way that medieval Catholics believed that the Black Plague was sent by God, like to punish the people for their depravity. That's
Trump. Yeah.
Like how there's like every time there's a hurricane, and like some fucking awful evangelical preachers like, well, that's because they're gay people in the world. Yeah. In the same way, Donald Trump is ordained by God to help bring down the pedophile regime that he is in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
currently.
Yeah.
He's Nero.
I oftentimes have to like hold back from like critical support for Trump destroying the U.S. empire. But
because there's a lot of collateral damage there that comes in the form of like Iranian children.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. So I mean, toward that end, what does it matter where my critical support goes? I just wanted to insert the statement that we are all astonishingly and profoundly powerless in this present moment, and it's a brutal reality to reconcile oneself with, but one's posting style is not, a revolutionary act one way or the other, but it is true. Something that I recently found myself saying to a friend, that information war is a significant part of present day warfare. It's a reality. Right. That is how warfare is conducted. There's a wing of the U.S. military and intelligence state that is dedicated to engaging in information warfare, info war, one might say, for short, like Alex Jones would have it. But and with as little power as we do have, as irrelevant as we are, I think it's very important that we don't lend ourselves into being left cover for the imperialist regime's information warfare machinations. So, we don't have a ton of power. Well, I've heard it said before, my critical support for Iran is, or your proletarian internationalism is doing even more nothing than my critical support for Iran. And in the sense that you are leaning into the snowball, the institutional inertia that is the information warfare being conducted by the present existing regime. And while there's not a whole lot that we can do, we can at least refrain from lending ourselves to that machine, you know?
Adding our voices to the fucking hegemonic chorus of Western imperialism.
Just one quick note on accelerationism and sort of the horrors that undergird it. Like, it's not only that the collateral damage is awful, it's the potential for cataclysmic nuclear war.
Right.
And this brings us back to the sort of
the Samson option.
The Samson option, the utterly depraved, lunatic ethno-nation state that is Israel, and the neoconservative Christian Zionist Third Temple insanity that is shaping our policy in the region. That is the great fear, you know, and there's really like at that point dialectical thought. I don't know what it's worth.
Well, so here's my response to that about the possibility and the threat of the nuclear war, annihilation. It's what Kazim, who's of the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, what he says. When Indiana Jones is holding his head up near the propeller, it says, "Then we'll die." And Kazim says, "My soul is prepared. How's yours?" I'm sorry, I don't actually mean like I want to die in a nuclear war. It's like,
I get it.
Like, we're not ending on that.
We can't end on that.
No, that's a good illustration of there's really no like there's no position to respond to that potential ultimate reality. Like there's no
right. There's no. All I mean by that is like so that example from that movie is that Kazim he has a charge in life, and it's to defend the Holy Grail. Yeah. And if he dies, then okay, that's what's going to have to happen. If that's what has to happen in order for me to fulfill my charge. And that's the same attitude that we should have about the necessity of what we call the revolution, or anything even approximating a step toward some semblance of justice in the world. Even if there is a threat of something like catastrophe, like what you're talking about. Because the alternative is to say, well, what am I going to do? It's something we can do because they're more powerful than us.
Yeah.
And that's also happens to be the attitude of people who are facing, genuine destruction right now.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's kind of a segue into the last question. I mean, it's not really, but...
Okay, so there's the question of the unipolar world and the shift towards maybe a multipolar world, and how that might change things when it comes to how we might conceive of events. Well, I am not one of those people that thinks multipolar world equals universally good, because I think it's going to mean more stuff like this happening, more imperial competition between the different poles. But I don't see that as worse than constant regime change wars that like the ones that happened over the war on terror period, right? This is exactly that, but just without one side supporting the other against the other. So I do think that there is in a multipolar order more room for rupture to occur, and that isn't necessarily a good thing, like we've mentioned, unless we have organization to take advantage of that rupture. So multipolar world without organizations to take advantage of potential rupture, it's not necessarily good. But multipolar world with organizations to take advantage of rupture, it's definitely good. So yeah, it's not going to be like everything's going to be better now that the United States can't just do whatever the fuck it wants because China might have a problem with it. That's not true at all, and I think that's a sort of a mischaracterization of people who think that multipolarity might be a good thing.
Yeah.
Like it's just the case that the era of the color revolution, that was obviously no good,
right?
So now that we're entering into this the end of the unipolar world, and thus the era of the color revolution, and the shift toward a multipolar world, which is potentially an era, like what we're seeing right now. If you look on your Instagram reels right now, you see all the missiles in Lebanon and in everywhere. That's possibly one thing that means. The other thing, like you said, though, the potential for some different way to respond to rupture besides just the way that we have it during the era of color revolution.
Okay. That was like the old way we responded to things.
Yeah, it's a hastening reality. The multipolar world is becoming. It's being birthed in this.
Yeah, whether or not you agree with it or not, it's happening.
And so I think there's different factions that have been courting it and wanting it in order to enact their projects. One version of that is the Epstein class, right? Even in some of those emails, Epstein was basically putting forth a pathway toward tribalism being in play on the world stage, which is one version. Another version would be anti-imperialism and greater sovereignty to oppressed nations and so forth. It's just going to be a contest all the way down. And so organization at every which way will decide.
And, you can't win the contest if you don't have a team.
Also, strategy. Like, I think decentralization can be, like right now in Iran, decentralization is a strategy and a tactic that can be used to resist. But as an overarching ethos, it's not a great organizing principle.
It's not an organizing principle. It's a tactic. That's the difference.
Yeah, that's like the Iranian defense strategy, which was like in case of they call it the mosaic defense. In case of a decapitation strike, everyone has the orders to carry out until command is reestablished, and they did that, and they have essentially just ruined years of work in creating of establishing bases in the Gulf, and have laid waste to Tel Aviv. I'm not saying they're winning or anything like that. I think that is yet to be determined. I think Iran is being devastated, but that decentralization strategy is it was good, but key to that strategy was holding out until command could be reestablished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So we need to build our own mosaic defenses and command strategies to be able to effectively hold off the assaults of the satanic pedophiles that rule us.
Yeah, and the satanic pedophiles are so just over and over again have demonstrated such adept capacity at co-opting any spontaneous upheavals or movements that appear on the world stage. And man, we got to learn that skill. And until we do, we're just going to keep losing.
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас. Без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, тянуть труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.